The document was older than most civilizations. It sat in the central database of the Galactic Employment Registry, updated every 100 cycles, translated into 9,000 languages. Every species that joined the galactic community received a copy within their first week. It was considered essential reading, a matter of survival. They called it the Red List. 147 jobs, 147 ways to die. The mortality rate for each position sat above 98%. Some jobs killed workers within hours. Others took weeks, slowly breaking down the body or the mind until nothing remained. The species read the list once, felt grateful for the warning, and never thought about it again. Park read the list 7 times in one sitting. She was 34 years old. She had spent 12 years as a deep-sea welder in the shipyards working in darkness and pressure that would crush most machines. She had burns on her arms from molten metal. She had a bad knee from an accident that should have killed her. She had a daughter in middle school and an ex-husband who never paid child support. She also had bills, many bills. The aliens who delivered the welcome package to Earth did not expect questions. They expected the usual reaction: horror, relief, perhaps some philosophical discussion about the nature of dangerous work. Instead, Park raised her hand during the orientation session and asked a question that made the translator unit malfunction twice before producing an answer. Job number 23, she said, Plasma Core Maintenance Technician. What is the pay? The ambassador, a creature made of layered membranes and floating sensory organs, did not understand the question. Payment for Red List jobs was irrelevant. No one took Red List jobs. That was the entire point of the list. The position offers compensation of 12,000 galactic credits per rotation, the ambassador finally answered. But this is not relevant because the position is classified as unsurvivable. The average worker lasts 19 hours before catastrophic system failure or psychological collapse. Did the math in her head. 12,000 credits converted to roughly 90 million Korean won per month. She could pay off her apartment in 2 years. She could send her daughter to any university in the world. She could finally fix her knee properly. Where do I apply? She asked. The ambassador's membranes rippled in what would later learn was extreme confusion. You cannot apply. The job is unsurvivable. Did the translation fail? No, said, I understood. Where do I apply? Word spread fast. Within 1 week, the Galactic Employment Registry received over 3,000 applications from humans. Within 1 month, that number reached 40,000. The jobs varied wildly: void repair, toxic atmosphere mining, predator zone surveying, unstable wormhole navigation. Each one promised death. Each one promised excellent pay. Humans did not seem to notice the first part. The Galactic Council called an emergency session. Representatives from over 200 species gathered in the Great Chamber, a structure built from crystallized starlight that had hosted diplomatic discussions for 10,000 years. They had debated wars in this chamber. They had ended plagues. They had negotiated the boundaries between empires. They had never discussed a species that wanted to die for money. Ambassador represented Earth. He was 51 years old, a career diplomat who had spent 20 years negotiating trade deals between countries that hated each other. He found the galactic community much easier to handle. At least aliens had logical reasons for their conflicts. He sat calmly through 9 days of debate. He drank coffee, a beverage he had brought from Earth in large quantities. The delegation watched him consume the dark liquid with something close to religious terror. They had analyzed the chemical composition and determined it should be fatal. Drank 3 cups per session. Your species, the council speaker finally said on the 9th day, is aware that these occupations are classified as unsurvivable. The classification exists because every known species that has attempted these jobs has died. Every single one. We have 10,000 years of data. set down his coffee cup. We are aware. Then why are your people applying? Is this a translation error, a cultural misunderstanding? Perhaps your species does not understand the concept of death. We understand death very well, said. We have been dying since we climbed down from the trees. We are quite familiar with the process. The speaker's crystalline form flickered with frustration. Then explain this behavior. No rational species seeks unsurvivable employment. Thought about Park, whose application had started all of this. He thought about the fishermen who went out in storms because their families needed to eat. He thought about the miners who descended into darkness every day knowing the mountain might collapse. He thought about his own grandfather, who had walked across a frozen peninsula during a war, carrying his baby sister on his back for 300 kilometers. We have a saying on Earth, he said, someone has to do it. The chamber fell silent. 9,000 translators processed the phrase and found it grammatically simple but conceptually incomprehensible. Someone has to do what? The speaker asked. The job, said. Whatever the job is, someone has to do it. If it needs doing, someone will do it. That is how we think. Even if the job kills them. Especially if the job kills them. If a job is too dangerous for anyone to do, that usually means it is important. Important jobs attract humans. We cannot help ourselves. We see a problem and we want to fix it. We see a gap and we want to fill it. We see a list of things that cannot be done and we want to prove the list wrong. He picked up his coffee cup again. You made a list of 147 impossible jobs. You told the entire galaxy that no one could survive them. You might as well have posted a challenge. The speaker processed this for a long moment. You are saying humans view the red list as a challenge. I am saying, replied, that you should not have listed the pay rates. That was your mistake. We might have ignored the list otherwise, but you told us these jobs pay well. You told us someone needs them done. You told us no one else is willing to do them. He smiled, and several delegates found the expression deeply unsettling. On Earth, we call that a job opportunity. The first human workers deployed to red list positions 3 months later. Park was among them. She carried a photo of her daughter in her pocket, a small toolbox she had modified herself, and absolutely no intention of dying. She had bills to pay. Sarah floated in the void between dimensions and thought about her student loans. She was 29 years old. She had a master's degree in mechanical engineering from Seoul National University. She had graduated at the top of her class with honors and recommendations from every professor she had ever worked with. She had applied to 47 companies in 3 countries and received 47 rejections. The galactic community offered her a job on her first day of registration. Job number 7, Void Walker. The position involved manually repairing hull breaches on ships traveling through unstable wormholes. The environment outside the ship did not follow normal physical laws. Space bent in wrong directions. Time moved backward and forward without warning. Gravity pulled in multiple directions at once. The previous record for survival was 4 hours. A silicon-based being called had held that record. They were considered the toughest species in the galaxy. Their bodies could withstand temperature extremes that would vaporize steel. Their minds could process information at speeds that made computers look slow. The volunteer had collapsed after 4 hours, screaming about colors that did not exist and sounds that came from inside his own bones. He never recovered. The medical report listed his cause of death as complete psychological dissolution. Sora had now been working for 8 months. She finished welding the breach in the cargo hold and checked her equipment. Her suit was standard issue, designed by engineers who had never expected a human to wear it. She had modified it herself over the past months, adding padding in places that chafed and removing sensors that gave false readings. The suit was ugly now, covered in patches and tape, but it worked. The void outside her helmet twisted and pulsed. She had learned not to look directly at it, not because it was dangerous, but because it was distracting. The void liked to show things, memories, possibilities, futures that might never happen. Sora had seen her daughter's graduation 3 times, and she did not have a daughter. She focused on the weld, clean lines, solid connection. That was all that mattered. When she returned to the ship, the captain was waiting. He was and his membranes were arranged in a pattern Sora had learned to recognize as amazement. "Another successful repair," he said. "You're 53rd this rotation." "The breach on Deck 7 needs attention too," Sora said. "I can do it tomorrow." "How do you remain functional? The void should have destroyed your cognitive processes months ago. Every model we have predicts complete breakdown within the first week." Sora removed her helmet and scratched her head. "I do not know. I try not to think about it too much. Thinking about it seems like a bad idea." This was not entirely true. Sora had thought about it. She had thought about it during her first walk, when the void had shown her a version of herself that had never left Earth, that had taken a safe job in an office, that had slowly died from boredom over 60 years. She had looked at that vision and felt nothing but relief that she had chosen differently. The void could not break her because she had nothing it could use. No regrets, no fears, only debt, and debt was not something the void understood. 12,000 kilometers away, on a dying star, Lee was having a similar revelation. Job number 89. Stellar Core Harvesting. The job required workers to descend into the outer layers of stars that were collapsing, extracting crystallized energy cores that formed only in the final moments before death. The cores were incredibly valuable, used to power entire planetary systems. They were also nearly impossible to retrieve. The protective suits had a 73% failure rate. The radiation levels exceeded anything most species could survive. The gravitational forces could crush a ship into a ball the size of a fist. Previous harvesting attempts had lost entire fleets. Had brought 12 humans and 3 modified fishing boats. The boats were not actually boats. They were small harvesting vessels that had rebuilt using principles his grandfather had taught him 60 years ago. His grandfather had been a fisherman a man who had spent his life reading the sea the way other people read books. He knew when storms were coming by the way birds flew. He knew where fish gathered by the color of the water. He knew how to survive waves that should have killed him 100 times over. "Stars are just big angry fish," told his crew on their first descent. "Respect the current, read the patterns, do not be greedy, take what you need and get out." His crew thought he was joking. He was not joking. They descended into the star's outer layer in a formation that made no sense to the observers watching from safe distance. The ships moved in spirals, dipping and rising in patterns that seemed random. The radiation alarms screamed. The hull temperature warnings flashed red. The gravitational sensors showed readings that should have been impossible. Ignored all of it. He watched the flow of plasma around his ship, looking for the same signs his grandfather had taught him to see in ocean currents. There, a slight change in color. There, a ripple in the magnetic field. There, a pocket of calm in the chaos. "Now," he said into the radio, "nets out." The harvesting nets deployed. In 19 days, his crew collected more energy cores than automated drone fleets had gathered in 6 cycles. They lost no ships. They lost no crew. They returned to the station with full holds and confused expressions. "We just did what made sense," told the reporters who swarmed him. "The star told us where to go. We listened." The galactic insurance industry collapsed within a year. Every model, every calculation, every prediction about human survival rates proved completely wrong. Humans died, yes, but not at the rates the models predicted. And more importantly, new humans always arrived to replace them. The actuary who had designed the original risk assessments spent 3 months studying human behavior before retiring in frustration. His final report contained only one sentence. They do not calculate risk. They simply decide it does not apply to them. Back on the Void walking ship, Sara finished her shift and returned to her small cabin. She had decorated it with photos from home, her parents, her friends, the small apartment in Seoul where she had grown up. She opened her banking application and checked her balance. 8 months of work, 8 months of doing the impossible. Her student loans were nearly paid off. Another 2 months and she would be free. She thought about what she would do then. Go home, probably, find a normal job, settle down. The Void had shown her that future too, and it looked peaceful. But the Void had also shown her something else. A future where she stayed. A future where she trained other humans. A future where the job that killed everyone else became just another job because humans refused to let it be anything more. She was not sure which future she wanted yet. She had time to decide. The research facility floated in stable orbit around a gas giant, far from any shipping lanes or communication networks. It was designed for sensitive work, the kind of work that required isolation, the kind of work that made other species nervous. Doctor arrived on a Tuesday and immediately asked for coffee. The researchers did not have coffee. They did not understand why she needed it. They watched her set up a small machine she had brought from Earth and brew a dark liquid that their sensors classified as a mild neurotoxin. She drank 3 cups before the first meeting. "Thank you for coming," the lead researcher said. His name was impossible for human vocal cords to produce, so had asked permission to call him Seven. He had agreed, though he did not understand why she chose that number. "We have questions about your species." "Everyone does," said. "What specifically?" "We have been studying human workers in red list positions for 2 cycles. Our data is complete. Our models are accurate, but we cannot explain our results." Seven activated a holographic display. Numbers and charts filled the air, showing survival rates, psychological assessments, physical performance metrics. The data was beautiful in its completeness, every variable measured, every outcome tracked. "Humans should not survive these jobs," Seven said. "The physical requirements alone exceed your species' documented capabilities. Your bodies are soft. Your bones break easily. Your temperature tolerance is narrow. Your respiratory system requires a specific atmospheric mixture that most work environments do not provide." "All true," agreed. "And yet humans survive. Not all of them, but far more than our models predict. We have checked our calculations 900 times. The math is correct. The humans are wrong." Laughed. Seven's crystalline form flickered with confusion at the sound. "I mean no disrespect," she said, "but that is a very alien way to think about the problem. The math cannot be wrong, so the humans must be wrong. Is there another interpretation?" Leaned back in her chair and considered how to explain 200,000 years of evolution to a being made of organized light. "You have to understand where we come from," she said. "Earth tried to kill us, not once, not occasionally, constantly, for our entire existence as a species. Ice ages that covered half our planet, predators that were faster and stronger than us, diseases we could not see or understand, natural disasters we had no way to predict. Many species face environmental challenges during development. Yes, but most species adapt to their environment. Humans did something different. We refused to accept the environment as it was. We changed it, or we changed ourselves, or we simply ignored the parts we did not like." Seven processed this. "You are describing denial, psychological rejection of reality." "I am describing stubbornness," said. "There is a difference. Denial means you do not see the danger. Stubbornness means you see the danger and decide to do the thing anyway." She stood and walked to the window. Outside, the gas giant storm swirled in patterns that had existed for millions of years. Beautiful, deadly, completely indifferent to anything living. "Let me tell you about wolves," she said. When humans first encountered wolves on Earth, every logical assessment said we should avoid them. They were pack hunters. They had teeth designed for killing. They were faster than us, stronger than us, better adapted to their environment than us. A reasonable threat assessment. Yes, and humans looked at wolves and said, "I want one." We did not avoid them. We did not kill them all. We walked up to the most dangerous predator in our region and decided to make friends. Seven's form flickered rapidly. That is not rational behavior. No, it is human behavior. We do not do what is rational. We do what we want, and then we figure out how to survive it afterward. The interview was interrupted by a communication from the Outer Rim. Han had just completed job number 1, the most dangerous occupation in the entire galactic registry, diplomatic escort through the necrosis zones. The necrosis zones were places where reality had broken. Space and time did not function correctly. Physics became suggestions rather than laws. Ships that entered rarely returned. Those that did return often contained crews that had aged centuries in minutes, or crews that had not aged at all but could no longer remember their own names. The job required escorting diplomatic vessels through these zones, keeping them safe, navigating paths that did not exist through spaces that should not be. Every species that had attempted the job had failed. The record for survival was 6 hours. Han had just completed a full crossing, 18 days through impossible space. He had delivered his diplomatic cargo safely and emerged on the other side asking if there was a cafeteria nearby. Requested permission to interview him. 7 agreed immediately. The research value was too high to refuse. Arrived at the station 3 days later. He was 47 years old, with hair at his temples and a calm expression that did not change when he was introduced to beings of pure crystalline thought. He had spent 15 years as a taxi driver in Seoul before joining the galactic workforce. "Tell me about the crossing," said. "How did you navigate?" Shrugged. "It was not so difficult. The zone shows you things, tries to confuse you, but I have driven through station at rush hour. I have navigated roads that make no sense, filled with people doing things that have no logic. The zone was similar, just larger." The psychological reports from other species describe complete dissociation, loss of self, inability to distinguish between real and unreal. "I know what is real," said. "My wife is real. My children are real. The payment waiting for me at the end of the job is real. Everything else is just scenery." Wrote this down. She had interviewed dozens of human red list workers now. They all said similar things. They all had anchors, family, debt, goals, simple things that kept them connected to reality when reality tried to slip away. "The zone showed me things," continued. "Versions of my life where I made different choices. Worlds where I was rich, worlds where I was dead, worlds where I had never been born at all." Did these visions disturb you? No, they were just possibilities. Possibilities are not real. Only this moment is real. Only what I choose to do right now matters. He smiled and saw in that smile something she had seen in every human worker she had studied. Not fearlessness, not ignorance, something else, something harder to name. Acceptance, perhaps, or maybe just the simple understanding that life was always dangerous, always uncertain, always trying to kill you in one way or another. The galaxy had just given humans bigger dangers, bigger uncertainties, bigger things trying to kill them. And humans had responded the same way they always had. They showed up for work anyway. Finished her report 3 months later. It was 700 pages long, filled with data and analysis and careful scientific language. But the conclusion was simple. Humans survive red list jobs because they do not believe in unsurvivable situations. They believe in problems that have not been solved yet. Given enough time, enough stubbornness, and enough coffee, they will solve them. 7 read the report twice. He still did not understand. but he was beginning to accept that understanding might not be possible. Some things simply were what they were. Humans were one of those things. Song had always been good at seeing opportunities where others saw problems. At age 12, she had started a business selling homemade snacks to students at her school. At 16, she had expanded to 3 schools and hired her friends to help with distribution. At 22, she had graduated from business school with a thesis on crisis management that her professors called disturbingly practical. At 31, she looked at the red list and saw the biggest opportunity of her life. The problem is organization, she explained to her first investors. Humans are surviving these jobs, but they are doing it alone. No support systems, no shared knowledge, no training programs. Every worker has to figure everything out from scratch. The investors were a mixed group. 3 humans who had made fortunes in Earth industries. 2 who had been quietly studying human economic behavior. 1 crystalline being who had calculated that human expansion into red list work would reshape galactic markets within a decade. You want to build a company around unsurvivable jobs, one of the human investors said. That sounds insane. It sounds profitable, corrected. Humans are going to keep taking these jobs. That is not going to change. The question is whether we do it smartly or stupidly. I prefer smart. She founded Last Resort Solutions 6 months later. The company's motto was simple. If it's too dangerous for anyone else, it's Tuesday for us. Within 2 cycles, Last Resort employed over 50,000 humans across 89 red list occupations. They had training programs. They had safety protocols. They had support systems for workers who needed psychological help or medical care. They had retirement plans and family benefits and all the things that normal companies offered for normal jobs. The mortality rate for red list workers under Last Resort was 40% lower than independent workers. Still high by any reasonable standard, but reasonable had stopped applying to humans long ago. Joined the company in its 2nd year. She was 43 years old, a former emergency room nurse from a hospital in Seoul. She had spent 20 years treating everything from car accidents to industrial disasters to the occasional victim of exotic animal attacks. Nothing surprised her anymore. She applied for job number 34, quarantine response. The job involved responding to outbreaks of alien diseases, containing contaminated areas and treating infected individuals. The diseases in question were not normal diseases. They were things that dissolved bone or rewrote DNA or turned organic matter into crystal. The average survival time for quarantine responders was 11 days. Lasted 11 months before she got bored with field work and asked for a research position instead. Her innovations changed everything. She applied triage protocols from Seoul's emergency rooms during flu season, sorting patients by urgency, and rather than following the galactic standard of treating everyone equally. She introduced rotation schedules that prevented worker burnout. She created decontamination procedures based on her experience with Earth infectious diseases. Mortality rates for quarantine response dropped by 67% within 1 cycle of implementing her changes. It is not complicated, she told the researchers who came to study her methods. You treat the patients you can save first. You rest your workers before they collapse. You clean everything twice instead of once. Basic medicine, basic management, basic common sense. The researcher taking notes paused. These concepts are not basic. They require understanding of resource allocation, psychological stress management, and contamination prevention at levels most species do not develop until much later in their technological evolution. Shrugged, on Earth, we had to figure these things out quickly. Diseases did not wait for us to develop proper understanding. We learned or we died. Mostly we learned. On the other side of the galaxy, Moon was having a similar impact on job number 112. Gravity well stabilization. The job involved maintaining equipment in areas where gravitational forces fluctuated wildly, sometimes increasing 1,000-fold in seconds, sometimes reversing entirely. Workers were crushed, stretched, torn apart, or simply vanished into spatial anomalies. Had spent 30 years as a construction foreman in South Korea. He had built buildings in earthquake zones, bridges over unstable ground, tunnels through mountains that did not want tunnels. He knew how to work in environments that wanted to kill him. Gravity is just another force, he told his crews. Like earthquakes, like typhoons, it wants to push you around. You do not let it. You find the stable points. You move when it is safe. You anchor everything twice. He trained 300 humans in his methods. He designed new equipment based on earthquake-resistant construction techniques. He created prediction models that could anticipate gravitational fluctuations with 80% accuracy. The Galactic Infrastructure Council quietly began hiring only human crews for their most dangerous projects. The cost was higher. The scheduling was more complicated, but the results spoke for themselves. Humans completed projects that had been abandoned for centuries. The economic effects rippled outward. Industries that had been stagnant for suddenly had new possibilities. Resources that had been too dangerous to extract became accessible. Trade routes that had been too risky to travel became profitable. Other species noticed. Some resented the change. Humans were too young, too primitive, too strange to be reshaping galactic economics. But resentment could not change the numbers. Humans were doing what others could not. That simple fact mattered more than history or tradition or pride. Song watched it all from her office on the company's headquarters station. She was 40 now, appearing in her hair, lines forming around her eyes. Last Resort Solutions had grown beyond anything she had imagined. They were not just a company anymore. They were an institution. "We received the new contracts today," her assistant said. "The Infrastructure Council wants us for the deep core projects in Sector 7. The Mining Consortium wants us for the unstable asteroid fields in the Outer Rim. The Diplomatic Corps wants us for permanent staffing on Necrosis Zone routes." "Accept them all," said, "and start recruiting. We will need another 10,000 workers by next cycle." "Where will we find them?" Smiled Earth. "There are always more humans willing to do impossible things. We just have to ask." She looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, humans were working. Void walkers and star harvesters and quarantine responders and gravity engineers, doing jobs that should have killed them, surviving anyway. The galaxy had a name for them now. They called humans the species that runs toward explosions. It was meant as an insult at first, a way of describing the madness that seemed to drive human behavior. Humans had adopted the phrase with pride. Of course they ran toward explosions, they said. Someone had to put them out. Turned back to her desk and the mountain of work waiting for her. There were contracts to negotiate, workers to train, safety protocols to improve. The job was never finished. There was always more to do. That was fine, she was human. She was used to impossible jobs. The Great Chamber had not seen a gathering this large in 3,000 years. Representatives from over 400 species filled the ancient hall, their forms ranging from clouds of organized gas to beings of solid metal to creatures that existed partially in dimensions human eyes could not perceive. They had come from every corner of the galaxy, traveling distances that would take human ships generations to cross. They had come to witness the end of something. The red list, displayed in holographic form above the central platform, glowed with the soft light of 10,000 cycles of accumulated data. 147 jobs, 147 ways to die. The document that had defined the boundaries of possibility for civilizations across the galaxy. Today it would be retired. Director Park stood at the podium, looking out at the assembled species. She was 46 now, 12 years older than the woman who had first asked about plasma core maintenance pay rates. Her hair had gone completely. Her hands bore scars from a dozen different work environments. Her eyes carried the weight of all the workers she had trained, supported, and sometimes buried. She had become the first director of the Galactic Occupational Safety Board 3 years ago. Her first act had been to begin the process of replacing the red list with something new. "Thank you all for coming," she said. Her voice carried clearly through the translation systems, reaching every being in the chamber. "I know many of you have traveled far. I know some of you have questions about why we are here. I will try to explain." She gestured and the holographic display shifted. The red list faded, replaced by a new document. The red list served an important purpose for 10,000 years. It warned species away from jobs that would kill them. It saved countless lives. It represented the best understanding of danger that the galactic community possessed. She paused, looking at the new document glowing above her. But understanding changes. Capabilities change. What was impossible yesterday becomes difficult today and routine tomorrow. The red list was built on assumptions that no longer apply. It is time for something new. The new document displayed 3 categories: jobs that required human consultation, jobs that required human supervision, jobs that required human crews. "We are not saying these jobs are safe," continued. "They are not safe. They will never be safe. People will continue to die doing them. That is the nature of dangerous work." She thought of Sara, still walking the void after all these years, training new workers in techniques she had invented herself. She thought of Lee, whose stellar harvesting methods were now taught in academies across the galaxy. She thought of all the humans who had taken impossible jobs and made them merely very difficult. But we are saying that unsurvivable is the wrong word. These jobs can be survived. Humans have proven that, and we believe other species can learn what we have learned if they choose to. The chamber murmured. 400 species processing what this meant for their economies, their cultures, their understanding of what was possible. Ambassador rose from his seat in the human delegation area. He was 67 now, his hair completely white, his movements slower than they had been 12 years ago. But his eyes were still sharp, and his voice still carried the same calm certainty it always had. "May I speak?" he asked. Director nodded. "Of course, Ambassador." Walked slowly to the central platform. The chamber fell silent as he approached the podium. Every eye, every sensor, every perceptual organ turned toward him. "When we first saw your list," he said, "we did not see warnings. We saw opportunities. Not because we are brave, though we are. Not because we are reckless, though we absolutely are that too." He smiled, and several delegates who remembered his coffee drinking from 12 years ago felt a familiar sense of unease. "We saw those jobs because someone somewhere needed them done, and where we come from, that is enough. That has always been enough." He paused, looking around the chamber at the beings who had watched humanity transform from primitive newcomers to indispensable workers. "My grandmother used to say something. The difficult we do immediately, the impossible takes a little longer. She was a rice farmer who raised 7 children through a war. She would have looked at your red list and asked why the pay was not better." Quiet laughter rippled through the human delegation. Several alien species attempted to process the concept of finding humor in danger. "Humans do not apply to unsurvivable jobs because we want to die," continued. "We apply because we are too stubborn to believe the universe gets to decide what survives. We will do that ourselves. Thank you very much." He turned to look directly at the new classification system displayed above the chamber. "You have given us a gift today. Not the retirement of the red list, though that matters. The gift is recognition. Recognition that impossible is not a permanent state. Recognition that limits are meant to be pushed. Recognition that someone somewhere will always be willing to do what needs to be done." He bowed to the assembled delegates, a gesture of respect that transcended species boundaries. "Thank you for letting us prove that." The ceremony concluded 3 hours later. The Red List was officially archived, its data preserved for historical study, but its warnings no longer binding. The new classification system took effect immediately. In the back of the chamber, Song was already reviewing applications. The Council had recently discovered 23 new jobs in the Outer Rim, each one more dangerous than anything on the original 147. They were calling it the Black List. Applications from humans had started arriving before the list was even officially published. Scrolled through the names: young workers fresh from training programs, veterans of Red List jobs looking for new challenges, former soldiers, former miners, former deep-sea divers, former everything, all of them with the same look in their uploaded photos, the look that said they saw the word impossible and heard opportunity. Her assistant leaned over her shoulder. "How many applicants so far?" 12,000, and that is just the first hour. The assistant shook his head. Will it ever stop? Will humans ever run out of willingness to do impossible things? Thought about her grandmother, who had rebuilt a business 3 times after 3 separate wars destroyed everything she had. She thought about her father, who had worked 18-hour days in a factory so his children could go to university. She thought about herself, a girl from a small town who had looked at the stars and decided she wanted to own part of them. "No," she said, "it will never stop. That is not who we are." She approved the first batch of applications and sent them to training. Somewhere in the Outer Rim, 23 impossible jobs waited. 23 opportunities for humans to prove once again that the universe did not get to decide what could be done. Only humans got to decide that. And they had already made their choice. Outside the great chamber, the stars burned with the same indifferent light they had burned with for billions of years. They did not care about the beings who crawled between them, doing dangerous work for modest pay. They did not care about lists or classifications or economic shifts. But somewhere out there, humans were looking at those stars. Humans were calculating distances and risks and pay rates. Humans were filling out applications and kissing their families goodbye and boarding ships bound for the edges of known space. Someone had to do the impossible jobs. Humans had decided it would be them. The galaxy was finally starting to understand what that meant.